Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with another episode of Total Breakdown. Today's battle showcases PharoahOwar's Greenskins as they take on Turin's vampire counts. Though he's going under the name Do It, I can confirm that it is Turin, and if you don't know who Turin is, make sure you check out his channel. I've linked to it in the description below. He's another great Total War player with a YouTube channel worth subscribing to. The Greenskins are led by Grimgor Ironhide, coming in with Foe Seeker, Stand Your Ground, and Wa. The Orc Shaman comes in with Power of Wa, Gaze of Mork, Here We Go, and Foot of Gork, while the Goblin Big Boss shows up on Wolfback with Slippery. We've got a unit of Goblins, most likely there to absorb some hits and pin units in place for a potential Foot of Gork, ranked up to rank 5 to help counter the low leadership and stick around for longer. The 8-Peak Loonies, Unbreakable, bringing some poison to the field, and then we've got a unit of Black Orcs and the Crimson Killers. These guys, alongside the two Giants, are also going to be quite willing to stay and fight, so great picks here to combat fear, terror, and other such approaches typical to the vampire counts. They are quite powerful against infantry as well, so the Crimson Killers and Giants will have little issue dealing with countless undead being raised on the field. The Rusty Errors, meanwhile, going to further reduce enemy armor while providing some trickle damage here and there, while the two units of Orc Boar Boy Biggins will look to shut down enemy cavalry and then provide frontline support. The vampire counts are led by the Red Duke in the air with Swarm of Flies, the Curse of Undeath, the Hunger, Invocation of Nehek, Van Hel's Danse Macabre, Raise Dead, Foe Seeker, Arcane Conduit, Red Fury, Undeath Resurgent, and El Sif. There's a Necromancer on the field as well, on horseback with Master of the Dead, the Curse of Undeath, Invocation of Nehek, and Raise Dead. I think the plan there was to double down on Invocation of Nehek and Raise Dead, so that the lines would always have plenty of support when both of these guys are alive, and even if one died, there would still be some crucial magical support there. Then we've got two units of Graveguard and the Stearnsmen who will do quite well against average Greenskin infantry, though they'll have a tougher time against heavily armored opponents, with the two Crypt Horrors bringing poison and armor piercing behind them. The two units of Skeleton Spearmen will do well enough to shut down enemy large units as well as bog down enemy troops, while the Claw of Nagash will provide constant regeneration and damage to enemy troops around it. Finally, we've got the Dire Pack and the Blood Knights, most likely looking to work together to shut down the inevitable Orc Boar Boy Biggins before providing support to infantry. Alright, as always, we're going to start with a conversation about deployment, and it's relatively simple from both sides of the field, though the Greenskins do try something a little clever here. Now, let's start with the Greenskins. We have the Goblins up front, again, just there to absorb some initial charges, maybe pin down some enemy units in place as well, so the heavier hitters can come in afterwards. Right behind them, we do have the Black Orcs to one side, the Crimson Killers to the other, with the Unbreakable 8-Peak Loonies in the middle themselves. Right behind them, we do have Grimgor Ironhide as well, there to provide some support to the center because it is considerably weaker than either flank. Either flank itself does have a giant apiece right behind the Black Orcs and the Crimson Killers, again, able to just dive right in and cause a tremendous amount of damage. They are very heavy hitting, and they are armor piercing as well, of course. Right all the way at the back, we do have the Rusty Errors, of course, providing that range support, able to cover anywhere that support might be needed, of course, and getting that trickle damage in, the armor sundering in, as well as damage to morale. Then, off to the side over here, we have both Orc Boar Boy Biggin units, as well as the Goblin Big Boss. And that's good placement on this map, because if your opponent deploys any cavalry to this side, you'll be able to see it more often than not, and you'll be able to push in and intercept and respond. Whereas if they decide to deploy anything on this side of the field, they will be hidden, and you need to be able to shield the woods over here so that you can actually respond to anything that comes in from any side. So it's a good idea to sort of be a bit more heavy on this left side over here, rather than sort of split your cavalry into two pieces, because if anything's on this side, you'll be able to see it and respond. On the topic of seeing things, the Orc Shaman, very cleverly deployed in the woods here, hidden right from the get-go, and trying to stay hidden, trying to stay sneaky. And while the Orc Shaman does that, let's take a look at the Vampire Count deployment here. You'll see they've got a front line of the Graveguard as well as the Stearnsmen, of course. Stearnsmen just a little bit stronger naturally. They do also have regeneration, so they'll be able to stick around and stay alive for a little bit longer. Right behind them, we have both units of Crypt Horrors, again, able to punch through and provide that extra support, the poison damage and the armor piercing wherever necessary, while the Claw of Nagash is right in between them. Again, wanting to keep the Claw within range of melee engagements, because of course the regenerative support is only within a range, as is the damage done to enemy units within that same range. So wanting to try and keep that clumped together with the rest of the army. Then we have the Skeleton Spearmen on either flank here. Of course, if any cavalry decides to get too adventurous, or if we have some direwolves or something coming in, these guys are able to respond and intercept and hold the flanks down, while all the way at the back you'll see we do have the Necromancer staying in safe distance, able to provide magical support, while the Dire Pack and the Blood Knights over here pushing off to the side already. They were deployed at the rear just in case anything came in from the sides or from the rear, of course. but seeing these guys coming in, obviously naturally pushing in already. So let's kick it into full speed and take a look at how this all breaks down. You'll see, as I mentioned right away, the Orc Boy Biggins and the Goblin Big Boss pushing forward, and the Red Duke as well as the Dire Pack with the Blood Knights responding, and the Blood Knights really want to get that charge off. They have a charge bonus of 76, which is absolutely massive. The Orc Boy Biggins in comparison aren't that good in the charge. So again, being very careful about the engagement, not wanting to take a direct charge from the Blood Knights, wanting to get maybe a surround in there if possible. Meanwhile, while that's happening, just a quick mention, the Orc Shaman has managed to sneak his way right up the forest, right all the way up to here, continuing his movement as well. Hidden, continues to stay hidden. Meanwhile, over here, the 8th Peak Loonies have been revealed again, trying to hold that center. The Rusty Arrows do get some shots off, getting the initial damage into the Crypt Horrors, not a bad target whatsoever, reducing their armor completely, so a lot more damage can go through, of course. Naturally, that's only a temporary reduction, but trying to get them taken care of nice and early because they are armor-piercing and quite heavy-hitting. Very threatening unit. Meanwhile, over here, though, you'll see the Goblin Big Boss does get sent in to try and intercept this incoming charge from the Blood Knights. Your hero units are able to do that. Unfortunately, not quite able to, and the Orc Boy Biggins do get hit quite hard by the Blood Knights, and at the same time, we have this unit of zombies being raised from the dead by the Red Duke, so completely pinned down there, those Orc Boy Biggins, and you'll see their morale is dropping quite significantly, quite fast, and they're going to take a lot of damage as well, and the Red Duke, too, wanting to get a piece of the action, decides to dive in and cause a little bit of pain for himself as well. These Orc Boy Biggins as well, forced to sort of engage now, trying to get a surround in on the Blood Knights, trying to get some damage through, maybe hurt the Red Duke and scare him off, because the Orc Boy Biggins that were primarily engaged and charged into, they don't stand a chance, otherwise they've taken a very hefty hit. Meanwhile, over here, you'll see the front lines are pushing towards each other, or rather, the Vampire Count front line is pushing towards the Greenskins as they continue to open fire with the Rusty Arrows back there, trying to get some damage into the Crypt Horrors, as I mentioned earlier, some of that trickling into the Claw of Nagash as well. Meanwhile, over here, in response to this chaos, you will see the Foot of Gork has been planted down, and it's going to do a significant amount of damage in this pack here. We've got the Dire Pack and the Blood Knights, and these guys are clumped together. They are cavalry, so they'll take a lot of hurt. The Orc Boy Biggins, meanwhile, have been terrified off, of course, by the presence of all these extremely frightening units. The Goblin Big Boss as well, very close to routing, wavering currently, but hoping that this Foot of Gork will do a decent amount of work and maybe turn the tide on this flank here. So you'll see, up goes the Foot, and as it comes down, just take a look at the tremendous amount of damage it does to both of these units. The Dire Pack almost immediately completely wiped out, while the Blood Knights there as well, taking a hefty amount of damage, down to about maybe 25% of their hit points, maybe 20% roughly, but taking a lot of damage there, and the Red Duke has to respond right away. You'll see the zombies took a little bit of damage as well, not as much as the other two units, of course, and the Red Duke was largely safe. So very fortunate there, the Red Duke took no damage, but right away having to drop the Invocation of Nehek, and a little bit of a mistake here, I have to say, popping an overcast Invocation of Nehek. I think the thinking there was to try and keep the Dire Pack as well as the Blood Knights alive, but unfortunately the Dire Pack just moments later begin disintegrating and completely die off. So the Invocation overcast is helping these zombies stay around for longer, which I guess is helpful, trying to keep these Orc Boy Biggins pinned, and more importantly is trying to bring these Blood Knights back into the fray. These guys took a lot of damage. They could have started crumbling. They were at critical binding, so good call there, at least popping Invocation on those guys, trying to bring them back into the fight. Meanwhile, you'll see these Orc Boy Biggins now back in, fighting once again, and another unit of zombies is being brought up here again, trying to pin these Orc Boy Biggins down once and for all. If the Vampire Counts are able to deal with the cavalry contingent that the Greenskins have, that provides a huge boost, not only in terms of damage dealt, but also tactically speaking. The Vampire Counts will no longer have to worry about rear charges, side charges, and wasting the raised dead on holding back cavalry. Meanwhile, over here, you'll see the front lines have fully engaged. We do have the zombies raised here by the Necromancer, trying to pin down this unit of Black Orcs over here, as well as the Giant that decided to dive in against both units of Crypt Horrors that were sent in there to try and take over this left flank, as seen from the Greenskins' perspective, nice and early. Meanwhile, you'll see the Crimson Killers on this right flank diving in to take care of the Skeleton Spearmen, and since the right flank from the Vampire Counts is extremely weak, this Giant was actually diverted rather than just drop in here as it was laid out to. Makes much more sense for the Giant to turn around and push into the center engagement instead, where we have the Graveguard as well as the Stearnsman, and just recently we're seeing the addition of some zombies, again raised from the dead, I believe from the Necromancer as well. Again, just trying to pin all these units down as Grimgor dives into the center as well, trying to make sure these guys get stuck in place, maybe take a little bit of that leadership damage from being charged from the flanks, from the rears. Again, the center is extremely weak. So if the center can be broken, while the 8 peak loonies, they'll stick around and fight to the death, but if they can be taken care of nice and early, it will give a very big advantage to the vampire counts. Meanwhile, over here, once again, you'll see the Orc Boy Biggins have been frightened off, while the Goblin Big Boss as well is routing as well. The Blood Knights, mostly stabilized at this point. They are largely brought back to full health, 50% of their health, a decent position to be in compared to where they were just moments ago, and this other unit of Orc Boy Biggins, very frightened, very ready to give up right now. Meanwhile, the Claw of Nagash decides to venture a little bit closer to the fray. Good call, you want to have the Claw of Nagash within reach, of course, because obviously the effects are only within a certain radius, both the damage dealt as well as the regenerative support. And meanwhile, Wa goes down from Grimgor Ironhide, supporting both of these giants, as well as, of course, the Black Orcs and the 8 peak loonies, as well as the goblins, who unfortunately they're being terrified away right now. But that extra support is going to do a lot of work, because these guys are going to have significantly higher melee attacks, are going to get a lot of damage through, so doing whatever possible to try and finish off these central engagements. Obviously, on the right here, you'll see the Crimson Killers have made very quick work of the Skeleton Spearmen. They have already disintegrated, they are dead, and now doing a great job responding right away after that, pushing in to try and envelop the center. So again, just slowly pushing in from this right flank and then trying to envelop the army, pushing in towards the left. And you'll see, meanwhile, the Crypt Horrors as well having a tough time in there, taking a lot of damage. They are in critical binding, this one unit of Crypt Horrors. They can very easily be turned to crumbling, and that'll spell doom for this left flank as well, because that's where a large amount of that support is coming from. Meanwhile, over here, you'll see this unit of Orc Boy Biggins as well, very quickly dealt with, terrified right now, but trying to keep them bogged down so that they actually get finished off and they don't have to be chased away and they can't be brought back. And meanwhile, this Goblin Big Boss is well routing currently, while all the way over here you'll see the Crimson Killers continue their sort of envelopment maneuver, and the Orc Shaman sitting in the woods, completely relaxed, does not need to care. That 1 foot of Gork netted him 68 kills. Great job there. A lot of those kills were extremely high value. Obviously, the Dire Pack completely wiped out, as well as a large chunk of the Blood Knights. Meanwhile, as the Crimson Killers here decide to go in for this round, you'll see a wonderful play here. We do have another unit of zombies brought up in just a moment. There you have it. And these zombies are now going to make sure that the Crimson Killers aren't able to get a full and clear engagement to the rear lines of the Sternsmen. Great movement there. Meanwhile, at the same time, the Skeleton Spearmen being pushed in to, again, cause some extra damage to the Crimson Killers, just a little bit more, while the zombies hold them in place. And we do have an Invocation of Nehek trying to hold this new right flank in place, trying to keep these guys alive, get that extra support in for some of these Graveguard units, because they definitely need it. Sternsmen might have regeneration, but these guys, most of these guys do not, of course. Meanwhile, you'll see over here the Red Duke and the Blood Knights have decided to come into the left flank to try and provide some support. Blood Knights diving into the Orc Boy Biggins, and the Orc Boy Biggins responding as well. Of course, the Blood Knights with the significantly higher charge bonus will get a lot more damage in, and at the same time, since the Claw of Nagash decided to quite cleverly and slowly move to this flank over here and push forward ever so slightly, the Orc Boy Biggins are within the radius of its trickle damage. So you'll see the Orc Boy Biggins, rather than just taking the damage from the charge from the Blood Knights, also eating damage from the Claw of Nagash without an actual engagement. At the same time, though, on this flank, both of these Crypt Horrors now in a very dangerous situation. They are both in critical binding. The Goblin Big Boss does decide to dive in and try and provide some support, while the Giant beats away alongside the Black Orcs here. Stand Your Ground does go down, trying to provide that extra melee defense and the extra leadership bonus, just to make sure that these lines do not falter, they do not break, especially as the Red Duke comes in alongside the Claw of Nagash. So a lot of danger being averted there with some abilities, great use there. Meanwhile, back here you'll see the Necromancer did decide to dive into the Rusty Arrows, making sure they're not able to get that support off. Great play there, and also bringing in the zombies to make sure these guys are pinned and possibly terrified and frightened off. Shutting down range support is extremely essential, especially when it has extra abilities like Armor Sundering in this case. Meanwhile, over here you'll see the Red Duke once again wanting to get into a part of the action, chomping away at some of these Orc Boy Biggins, diving in there, getting a significant amount of hurt in, and once again dropping Invocation of Nehek, trying to bring these Blood Knights closer to full health, because they are a very high value unit. You don't want to just lose them to a single foot of Gork and a little bit of damage here and there. Meanwhile, over here you'll see one unit of Crypt Horrors crumbling right now, very quickly falling apart, almost dying away, and the Claw of Nagash does decide to get involved. Pops into the Black Orcs as well as the Giant, trying to get a little bit of damage in there, while the Blood Knights dive in as well, still under the influence of the Invocation of Nehek, trying to hurt the Giant, trying to get rid of it. The Black Orcs take a decent hit from that charge as the Red Duke dives in as well. A lot of work being done there, and the Goblin Big Boss still in there, still incessant. One unit of Crypt Horrors, as you'll see, has been completely crumbled and destroyed, and now the second unit of Crypt Horrors as well beginning to crumble. Undeath Resurgent does go down, not only for that extra melee defense, trying to keep these guys alive, but more importantly perhaps for that leadership boost. Leadership right now is very important to stop these guys from crumbling and falling apart. literally and metaphorically speaking, because as they crumble, obviously they take a lot more damage. So the leadership boost should help counter that. Unfortunately, it's just not enough. They're still right now at -10, as you can see, so they're still falling apart quite easily. Meanwhile, over here you'll see the goblins here pushing forward once more. These zombies, again, just trying to pin everything in place, trying to surround the giant and scare it off, while the necromancer continues to keep the rusty arrows engaged as they try to run away. The zombies back here sort of lagging behind, finishing off a couple of these rusty arrows, I believe, and otherwise the giant here doing a great amount of work to the Graveguard as well as the Skeleton Spearman. These guys are in critical binding. There you'll see the Graveguard starting to crumble there, so great work there using the giant to cause a significant amount of damage. And over here on this left flank, once again, you'll see yet another Foot of Gork. So that is the second Foot of Gork, both Feet of Gork getting some use in this battle, and once again targeting that clump of Blood Knights. There's a couple of zombies in there as well. We also have this unit of Graveguard in there. The Red Duke, unfortunately, has disengaged, so he's not going to take any damage. There's also the Claw of Nagash, so a lot of units in there that could take a decent amount of hurt. Might lose a unit of Black Gorks, but they are routing, so they might make it out just in time, and you'll see the entirety of the Vampire Count army sort of clumping in as this Foot of Gork comes in. And once again, very well placed, very well played. The Vampire Count's not able to retreat in time, and look at the amount of damage this Foot of Gork does. Look at the Blood Knights fall apart. They have taken so much damage, down to 308 hit points already. Morale dropping all of a sudden. They're dropping into critical binding, already about to start crumbling here. The Red Duke trying to dive in, provide some support, maybe hold back the giant there so that the Blood Knights can escape, and you'll see he does drop Foe Seeker to dive in just a little bit faster. Every little bit helps, of course. Goblin Big Boss, meanwhile, routing away as well. The Black Orcs managed to stay alive despite all that, and now the Blood Knights in a very precarious situation. Obviously, they're in critical binding still, very close to crumbling, and there you have it. There comes the crumbling. An Invocation of Nehek right now might have kept them alive, but unfortunately, I think that initial overcast Invocation of Nehek kind of cost the Vampire Counts their Blood Knight unit. You'll see very quickly the Blood Knights do start falling apart, taking a lot of damage because of crumbling. The Red Duke decides to get out of there, pops whatever he can to try and help, but it's completely a failed cause, a lost cause, as the Claw of Nagash as well, trying to dive in there to cause some damage, try and provide some support with that regenerative support, but nothing happening here. The Blood Knights do die away. So great attempt in trying to keep them alive with the Claw of Nagash. Unfortunately, there was no Invocation of Nehek. Arcane Conduit does go down, trying to get that health, or trying to get the Winds of Magic back so that some of that spell casting can make another appearance, but unfortunately, with such a high value unit gone off the field, the Vampire Counts are certainly on the back foot. The Rusty Airs back into it as well, getting some shots and trying to get some damage done, and meanwhile, you'll see the Crimson Killers again continuing their envelopment while these zombies trying to give a little bit of chase here, trying to shut down that surround that's coming in, that inevitable surround. Meanwhile, all the way at the distance, you'll see the Orc Shaman really hasn't moved all that much, just poked a little bit further to the edge of the tree line there, getting a beautiful view, having a little bit of a picnic, maybe a little sandwich here and there or something, but 207 kills with 2 Feet of Gork, standing, watching, causing mass devastation. And sure, some of those kills were zombies here and there, but there were a lot of wolves from the Dire Pack as well as Blood Knights as well. So very, very good use of the Orc Shaman there. Now, as we resume into full speed, you'll see the Necromancer there sort of pulling away, trying to stay safe from Grimgor Ironhide's Thunderous Axe, of course. Goblin Big Boss diving back in, trying to hit the Red Duke while he is on the ground. Claw of Nagash moving away with the Red Duke, while the Rusty Arrows as well as the Crimson Killers give chase. You'll see that unit of zombies does pop in to hold the Crimson Killers in place, while the Red Duke turns around and dives right back in, just trying to slam them around a little bit. Claw of Nagash doing the same, trying to get a lot of hurt in, trying to take care of this very high threat unit. The Giant does get pushed in. Wah does go down. Again, just trying to get rid of the Red Duke. That leadership damage will make a huge difference, forcing all of the Vampire Count units to crumble and fall apart. You'll see this unit of Graveguard as well crumbling right now, so another high tier, relatively speaking, unit going to be off the field. And meanwhile, the Red Duke just hovering around the Claw of Nagash, trying to get that regenerative support, diving in there, trying to rescue the Necromancer as well. The Necromancer, obviously a very high value unit, needs to be kept alive. And meanwhile, you'll see as the Red Duke dives in here, pops Foe Seeker, trying to get a lot of work done against the Giant. Grimgor Ironhide over here beating away at the Graveguard, just trying to finish them off a little bit faster. And meanwhile, the Gaze of Mork comes flying across the field over this beautiful terrain and gets a wonderful shot into the side of the Red Duke. Great amount of damage done as the Red Duke decides to toss around this Crimson Killer. A massive amount of damage done there. So once again, great use of the Orc Shaman, getting that shot off, getting a decent amount of damage into the Red Duke, doing a decent amount of morale damage as well, and now the Rusty Arrows continue to get shots off as well. Of course, the Goblins as well diving in there with their little spears, poking and prodding away, but you'll see the Red Duke has taken a lot of damage and is forced to retreat. The Giant giving chase as well. The Claw of Nagash trying to stick close to the Red Duke, trying to heal him up while also trying to maintain a short distance to the enemy as well to get that trickle damage in. And you'll see the Red Duke does dive into the Rusty Arrows, trying to finish these guys off once and for all. Another unit of zombies does get pulled up. Great use of the zombies here, trying to pin these guys down, trying to give them, well, give them a lot of trouble on the field. No way that they can sort of stand still and stand steady and be safe. They are terrified off right now, so they are running away, and the Red Duke really should have given chase here to try and shut them down once and for all, but instead decides to pop into the central engagement instead. You'll see the Crimson Killers are quite heavily damaged. Stand Your Ground is down right now, trying to keep these guys intact, trying to keep them fighting with a higher melee defense and higher leadership, but unfortunately with the Red Duke in there causing so much damage, these guys are going to start routing. Meanwhile, you'll see, though, the Red Duke himself has taken a tremendous amount of damage. A very dangerous situation here. Pops Foe Seeker to try and get out of there as well once again. And the Necromancer down here being beat on by the Giant. An extremely dangerous situation there. Necromancer starts to crumble. Meanwhile, the Claw of Nagash here decides to dive in on the Giant to cause a little bit of damage. They're trying to take care of it while the Rusty Arrows do return to the field. You'll see the Giant does drop there, so well done by the Claw of Nagash. Very important kill there. But the Rusty Arrows, and this is just wonderful battlefield management here, I have to point it out. The Rusty Arrows just staying back on the ledge there, and this is why they needed to be chased off. With their range, they have great coverage right now, and they're able to actually screen the Red Duke from the sort of safe zone of the Claw of Nagash. So if he wants any of those regenerative juices of the Claw of Nagash, he needs to push in and get a lot closer, but the Rusty Arrows are going to fire away, and they're going to keep him at bay. So the Claw of Nagash has to disengage unless the Rusty Arrows are taken care of. Great management there, great way of making sure the Red Duke is unsafe. And you'll see, still with Arcane Conduit active, I think trying to get one more cast of the Invocation of Nehek on the Red Duke himself, of course, trying to stay alive, because right now he is crumbling. He's at 340 hit points, very close to dying, needs to be very cognizant of the Rusty Arrows and their range, and needs to, again, just try and get some of that recharge juice off the Claw of Nagash. The Claw, though, trying to stay engaged here, beating on the Giant here, trying to get in on Grimgor Ironhide. The Sternsman just barely staying alive, a couple of units of Graveguard left. We've got the Skeleton Spearmen as well as the zombies doing whatever they can to try and scare the Greenskins off. Wa does go down, though, so a lot of damage being returned, and meanwhile you'll see here the Red Duke, another volley of arrows from the Rusty Arrows do come in, and getting a significant amount of damage. Heart in the throat probably right now, as a lot of damage does come through from that volley. Again, just barely able to get out of crumbling, though, and decides to pull away. Oh, pops back into crumbling after that volley, but just sort of on the ledge there, on the fence between crumbling and not crumbling, decides to pull away and just wait for the Winds of Magic to make a comeback so that Invocation can go down and stay safely away from the Rusty Arrows. And you'll see the Rusty Arrows now, meanwhile, targeting the Claw of Nagash, trying to get that taken care of, because it is the other high threat unit on the field, and the Claw of Nagash responding in kind, diving into the Rusty Arrows. The Vampire Counts, I think, realizing just how much of a threat the Rusty Arrows provide. Again, not just in terms of damage to health and morale, but also in terms of a tactical perspective. You saw exactly what happened there. The Red Duke didn't have a choice, had to fall back, wasn't able to poke closer, wasn't able to get close to the Claw of Nagash, and the Claw of Nagash had to be pulled away from this engagement with the Giant to take care of the Rusty Arrows so that air superiority could be returned, of course, to the Vampire Counts. So here you'll see the Rusty Arrows once again terrified off, the Claw of Nagash doing a wonderful job, and over here the Orc Shaman still hidden, still tucked away. Really, all it would have taken to save the Vampire Counts, I think, over 140 units worth of death. I think they were at 62 after that first foot of Gork, that the Orc Shaman was revealed. All it would have taken was for the Red Duke to have just poked into the woods, or for the Blood Knights to have poked into the woods. They were already engaged over here. In fact, you can see the remnants of the engagement. They just had to move a little bit that way, but instead they were greedy, they were hungry, so they pushed in towards the main engagement instead, and as a result of that, the Orc Shaman's kill count has popped up all the way to 207, so very precarious situation there, and you'll see the Orc Shaman is still at it right now. The Red Duke is being targeted by another Gaze of Mork, while the Claw of Nagash, meanwhile, is popping into the central engagement once again, and some great management here. So you'll see that Gaze of Mork making its way towards the Red Duke. I think the Red Duke just catches it, decides to change the direction, so great work there, making sure that it's not able to get a hit off, and this is absolutely wonderful. Take a look at this. Pops Foe Seeker, gets that extra speed boost, just pushes right out of the way, just barely dodges the Gaze of Mork, and quite well played there, quite well managed there, making sure that that Gaze does not hit, because if it had, that would almost definitely be the end of the Red Duke. Would have set him into crumbling, if not killed him entirely, and a combination of the damage from the Gaze as well as crumbling would have completely devastated the Red Duke, and as a result, the entire Vampire Count army would have fallen apart. But there's still more to the battle to go. Of course, the Rusty Air is still routing now, and the Claw of Nagash disengaging a little bit, trying to stay safe from the Giant. Of course, the Giant can take care of the Claw of Nagash. Red Fury does go down again, getting a little bit of extra help. The charge bonus that from that extra charge, as well as a little bit of extra vigor and armor-piercing damage as well, trying to take care of Grimgor as well as the Giant. Meanwhile, you'll see the Red Duke here needing to be very careful. Went into crumbling again there for a little second, and another unit of zombies does get pulled up. I'm not sure if that was the best call, but these guys are now pushing in again, trying to scare Grimgor off. He is very low on morale, so good surround with the Sternsmen there as well. Unfortunately, they are now gone off the field as well, but a good surround there with the Claw of Nagash popping in as well can take care of Grimgor, and that leadership damage can make a huge difference to the Greenskins. Unfortunately, though, you'll see the Goblins and the Rusty Airs once again returning to the field, and this is why when a unit is terrified, you chase it off if you can. If the Red Duke had just given chase to the Rusty Airs when they were over here, these guys wouldn't be firing right now, and so now the Red Duke once again being screened needs to be very careful not to take hits, so sort of zigzagging, doing things that many important characters in various movies haven't done in the past, taking a fair number of shots right to the face and then diving in to the Rusty Airs, trying to finish them off once and for all. And you'll see with that final dive in, they do shatter completely, and they are now off the field. The Red Duke taking a huge risk there, though. And meanwhile, over here you'll see, and we'll throw it on instant replay, but the Claw of Nagash did take care of Grimgor Ironhide, finished him once and for all. Great management there, great work there, making sure that the leadership damage does trickle through. Unfortunately, though, Giants have extremely high leadership, so despite that, even though the Goblins are now terrified and on their way out, and the Rusty Airs have, of course, been shattered completely and they're on their way out, the Giant is still willing to fight. And the little boost to its rank up to rank 2 may be what's sort of making the difference right now in terms of leadership, but despite Grimgor's death, the Giant is still hungry for blood, still wants to get some kills in, beating on these zombies. The Claw of Nagash realizing that, pulling back in and trying to get some more damage in. He gets a decent charge in, but of course, the Giant is able to get a lot of work done as well. Meanwhile, the Orc Shaman now trying to dive back in to provide some support. The Orc Shaman does have Encourage, so trying to get within range of the Giant to make sure the Giant doesn't actually shatter and run off the field. Because obviously, within that certain radius, the Encouragement gives a little bit of that leadership bonus, and that can really make all the difference right now. The Orc Shaman probably out of Winds of Magic, not able to do anything else, so diving in however he can. The Giant, again, basically having taken care of the zombies, now disengaging, trying to pull closer to the Orc Shaman as well, as the Orc Shaman dives into the Claw of Nagash, or I guess is it vice versa. The Orc Shaman gets tossed down, and you'll see the Red Duke just hovering around the Claw of Nagash, out of necessity more than anything else, sticking very close, because obviously still getting that regenerative juice, if you will, trying to stay alive, disengaging completely. Good call here, no need to rush in and engage, try and get the Red Duke's health back, because obviously when he's so low on health rather, he's also very close to crumbling, morale is low, very dangerous situation, but you'll see here getting a little greedy, Claw of Nagash pushing in, diving into the Orc Shaman again, getting a little bit of that trickle damage onto the Giant, but the Giant returns and gets a good hit on the Claw. Meanwhile, the Red Duke does begin to shatter, begins to disintegrate, and there goes the Red Duke. And with that death, the Claw of Nagash as well begins to disintegrate basically right away. Another solid hit from the Giant, doing a decent amount of damage, and ultimately, there goes the Claw of Nagash, and a Pyrrhic victory for the Greenskins. A very close battle with great use of magic from both generals. Invocation of Nehek kept the Blood Knights alive for a very long time, and the Claw of Nagash was used to great effect to keep the Red Duke alive and able. The 2 feet of Gork and a Gaze of Mork were also used to great effect, and great positioning screened the air, preventing the Red Duke from having too much freedom. Scouting the woods early on would have made all the difference in this battle, and unfortunately the Vampire Counts simply did not take a peek into the trees, into the woods. They would have caught that Orc Shaman in the middle of his picnic and finished him off with relative ease. As always, guys, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content and keep sending in those battle replays. Said it before, I think it's one of the best ways to learn, and it's always nice to see such intense battles from the community. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.